Call this meeting to order at 6:14 p.m.
Goodbye.
And I choose to begin this meeting by recognizing that the Grand Prairie Public School Division is located on the Treaty 8 territory, the traditional and contemporary home of the Cree, Dene, and Métis people. We're privileged to have the opportunity to live, learn, and lead on this land. And I encourage us to use our planning and goal setting to embed the act of real reconciliation in this vision. Also, just review our universal guiding principles for all things that we decide and do. We'll hold ourselves accountable and we'll ask, is it good for students? Will it build trust and good relationships? Will it help us improve? Is it the responsible thing to do? And are we being open, honest, and ethical? Looking around the table for additions to the agenda, I think we have Superintendent McDonald.
If we could add a new section F to the first section on the agenda, call to order and introductions. And business, or sorry, a second bullet in E, business arising from previous minutes. I apologize for that. Scheduling meetings with the City of Grand Prairie Mayor and Council and the Grand Prairie Catholic School Division Board of Trustees.
Did anyone else have anything else they needed to add to the agenda?
Just a point of clarity, we have an in-camera section on the agenda already tonight, but I'd like to make note that we require that to discuss two issues. One, collective bargaining update, and second, a personnel issue.
Great. Anything else? Then I'll look for a motion to approve the agenda. Trustee Martin? Any discussion? Those in favor? Perfect. And we have a trustee self-declaration of conflict of interest. If anyone has a conflict of interest for something on the agenda, now would be the time. All right, then we will, looking for a motion to approve the regular board meeting minutes of November 26, 2024. Vice Chair Cook. Any discussion on that? All in favor? Perfect. Moving right along. Business arising. We had the first reading of the proposed bylaw. We're looking for second and third reading, but there was an proposed amendment.
Yeah, well, I have a little bit of an update on that.
Please.
And so, following the last meeting and some discussions about, questions about candidates going into the RCMP to request criminal record checks, I've confirmed with the RCMP that there are no issues with respect to that. There is a cost associated with the criminal record check, and it's currently $55. Volunteers are free because the RCMP supports people to volunteer. But anybody who requires it for employment or as a result of a bylaw like this or or anything that is not voluntary, a request to support volunteering, would be charged that fee. So I took the liberty of creating an amendment to the bylaw that was adopted and given first reading last meeting, based on the board's discussion about potential barrier of a deposit for the election. And I thought, projecting ahead, there may be discussion on that, so I include it. But I note that in discussions with our legal counsel, it is quite a rare thing if the division were to reimburse candidates for a fee like that. Let's share that just for background information.
And I believe it's in the agenda later as well, right? Or is that just where it is?
And that's just where that description resides. That's why I read it.
Sure. Does anyone have any questions or comments on the proposed addition of that bullet point? So I suppose that if it was in there, it would mean that the Grand Prix Public School Division would reimburse them for the cost of the $55 for their criminal record check or whatever it
Whatever the
happens
cost
to
is.
be when they go for it. If it wasn't in there, it would be assumed that they would cover the cost of the criminal record check. So we have the first reading down. We will have to decide. There was if someone wants to make the motion to amend it or to not, and both of those motions were in here somewhere. They're later in the report, I think, right?
Yes.
Page 32.
1 second.
And so you could move that the bylaw be given second reading. If it were to fail and require the amendment, you could make the amendment for the third reading, or you could use the second motion shown on page 32.
So I'm looking for a motion from someone.
But basically to either support moving forward where the candidate pays the deposit, in which case you would go with the first amendment. You felt the division should assume the cost for candidates to submit the criminal record checks. You could use the second motion found on page 32.
Trustee Olet?
I would stick with the first.
So trustee Olet moves that bylaw 2024-1 be given second reading. Motion's in order. Is there any discussion on that?
But just to meet the requirements of the act, this is bylaw, Grand Prairie Public School Division bylaw 2024-1, the criminal record check bylaw, as read in total at the last meeting.
Trustee Martin?
That's what it covers, like, it's the last one, read here.
Sorry,
We're not putting the wording that's in here, but it's $5
you're voting on the original.
originally. Okay.
That's right. Any other discussion or questions? Not seeing any. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Looking for another motion for third reading. Trustee Martin. Moves that bylaw 2024-1 be given its third reading.
Criminal record check bylaw.
You should put that in the motion.
I'm sorry.
Any discussion on
What
that?
about your name?
All right, all in favor? And that motion has passed. Thanks for your work on that, Superintendent McDonald. It was interesting, interesting work.
It was very interesting. So just in follow-up, we will be notifying the city's returning officer tomorrow that this bylaw passed third reading this evening and comes into effect effective December 31st. And we've already spoken with the city and they are prepared to ensure that all candidates submit a criminal record check as we've discussed. I will have a hard copy printed late, before you leave this evening, if we can sign off. Oh, no, we'll have to get it when Mr. Oladelli is back.
Sure.
But we'll sign it off when he gets back and then it'll be in effect.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that. Then we'll move to S, which is scheduling. So I believe we all received the email from Mrs. Fredland regarding a couple dates. So the first was our meeting request for the Grand Prix District Catholic School Division. Is anyone not able to make the suggested date?
That was the 13th.
Sometime in the afternoon of January 13th, I believe.
No, I can't.
Anyone, we're looking for can't. Anyone else cannot? Christine, seeing that, we're probably gonna go ahead then because it's only one who can't make it, if that's okay.
That's good.
You're fine with that?
Yeah.
Does anyone have you guys had a suggested time in there too? You didn't? Oh, I'm imagining it? Yep. Okay. Well, there is, if anyone's interested, from 12 to 1, ASBA is holding a virtual session on ASCDP. If you guys wanted, maybe we could get together here and watch that lunchtime meeting or whatever session, and then just go right into a meeting with the Grand Prix District Catholics. If that works.
Host it here at 1 p.m.
Yeah.
Sandy?
Would that work? And then we could maybe meet here to watch that session beforehand? Okay. Good. All right, so the next dates were with the city of Grand Prairie. So we're gonna go, there's a lot of dates.
We talked about doing a doodle poll.
Yeah, we did. Yeah. Can we maybe do the doodle poll instead of deciding tonight?
We
Because
should.
it's kind of irritating to do it this way.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Perfect, okay. So we'll do that, but if you guys can answer, we'd like to get back to the city. What day is it? It's Tuesday, so can we commit to getting back to them on Friday or on Friday? So if we can have our answers in by Thursday? That seem fair? Okay. Anything else on those? Chair report, okay, so. Yeah, most of our board met with administration on December 5th. We, just a quick recap of the day. Assurance as part of our role as a trustee, and so we dove deeper into the directions, we drove deeper into the directors of education work plan. So we heard evidence, asked questions, and got a better understanding of the work that's being done and the work that's being worked on. Our board really appreciates the education director's time and their planning that went into their presentation. It's always very interesting work, but as much as it is interesting, it's also essential that we see and hear what's being done and why, and it helps us have that piece of assurance. So thanks for that. We also reviewed changes to our continuous improvement index, and we made some adjustments to our new agenda and board package. That'll be changing a little bit in January. We did some work around division election planning for 2025. And really, it was some really good conversations and a great use of our time. So thanks to administration and work staff for helping us plan that day. It was great. Looking around the table, did I miss anything on that?
No, and I think just to add, I agree with everything you said, but it's been very nice sort of over the course of this term to actually see the changes and improvements too that the system leadership team have shared. It's really come together and you can really see the improvement.
You see the evolution?
Yeah.
Yeah. We get so caught up in the short, look at it over a period of years. It's a good observation. Thank you.
Vice Chair Cook, you were going to report on striving for excellence for us.
Yes, so the new sort of format sort of was held at our partners at Northwestern Polytechnic. And the evening sort of format was a little bit different, but the students and parents came. The venue was beautiful. We had sort of two local musicians and then a sort of a comedian sort of circus act. Again, that our new sort of executive director and I think the Education Foundation team did an excellent job of, on a brand new sort of event, making sure that everything ran as smoothly as it did. The students were all presented like on the college stage. When they left, they were given a cookie and our thanks. And one thing sort of new about that venue is, there are drinks sort of allowed sort of in the menu. So, there was a break and an intermission. And I think the other thing too that was very well said by Northwestern Polytechnic as well is that sort of this is just the continuation of the partnership. And I think it was really good for the students to be there and sort of see and be comfortable with NWP. And it just was I think a really nice transition. So look forward to more feedback on what parents and students think. And yes, a very big thank you to Shara in particular, because we know that the work that
Thank you for striving.
you've done, not just for Stride Practice, but just the Education Foundation, you've certainly been, just a real source of constant there, and it really held it together beautifully for us. So thank you.
Any questions about the event? Thank you for that. Trustee Johnston, the Teacher Trustee Liaison Committee, do you have anything you want to share on that?
Sure. Chair Nellis and I met with the Teacher Trustee Liaison Committee meeting on December 3rd. It was good. I attended virtually. Chair Nellis was here in person. Good assortment of teachers from across the division. And it was a good chance to share some updates on some of the things that the board had been working on. Chair Nellis shared information about our advocacy work. And I shared an update on the budget. The primary discussion at the meeting centered around the board social, trying to gather some information from them about some of the topics that we had discussed previously at the board table. Looking for trying to square the results of the search, generally very positive with the generally low turnout among staff. So trying to identify some things that could possibly be changed. I'm sure there will be a lot that we'll probably go into in the future when it comes to planning for the next board social or whatever that looks like. But I would say that that one thing that caught a lot of attention was potentially rebranding the event with some sort of new name instead of just the board social to perhaps reflect better that it's really a celebration of the staff and not something strictly about the board. But other than that, it was I thought a very productive meeting, helpful to hear from that stakeholder group and learn more about some of the issues affecting schools. Miss anything?
No, I think that's good.
That's good.
Good comments. That I thought that was really, the comments were really wholesome. Like you got a lot of information from the people that were there. So I was pleased to see that overall though they did enjoy the event, and I appreciated the feedback was well written, and I could really understand what had happened at that meeting. It's good.
Perfect. Non-instructional associations committee, I'm not sure, or it must be you who's.
Yeah,
It's just
those are
the minute.
minutes for submission. The next meeting is in February.
Perfect. Trustee Olet, Professional Development Fund.
Yes, we met, actually it was just last week. Lots of great applications coming in from staff, teachers, and we meet again February the 6th.
Any questions for Trustee Olet? Right. Board Policy 1 revisions, Mr. Cook.
Yeah, I just would call your attention to the policy that is has the suggested sort of amendments in it. And so we met November 26th, thanks to Mrs. Fredman, Superintendent McDonald, Trustee Buziak, Trustee Johnson, and myself. You'll see it wasn't about wordsmithing the policy, but one of the things that you will notice is we did go through and try to garner some sort of consistency. So we moved sort of there was will in places and shall in places. And so you'll notice that throughout the document that again, it's semantics, but we moved from will to shall and it's throughout the document. The other thing that you'll notice on the first section of operating guiding principles, sort of in keeping with our strategic planning and our priorities, and belonging being sort of one of those, we moved the second bullet point from an inclusive culture just to say to belonging. A culture of belonging in schools shall be fostered. So that was a suggestion, and maybe I'll just stop there. Does that sound reasonable? So that was the suggestion. And then further along, on page 25 of 56, it would be, there's a bullet point. It says staff shall be encouraged to adopt new strategies to support student learning, monitoring their progress in a timely fashion, and adapt their strategy when relevant. We were just looking, for the policy to have, a positive sort of presentation as opposed to like if unsuccessful. So we suggested when relevant. And then further along, we talked about program development shall consider the needs of our students and our community, and deleted the shall be reflected in a responsive manner. Again, trying to really sort of focus on the needs of our students and of course our community as well. And then further along under human resources, there is just a section under the best candidate, most qualified. Again, tightening that up to just say we shall seek the best candidate. And there's a lot of shall changes. That was the extent of the recommended changes on our policy one, which is our mission and guiding principles.
Any questions on those
Yeah, it's,
changes?
what made you decide shall versus will?
It really, it was semantics. We just said will some places, shall some places.
Pick one and stick with it.
And
Yeah.
Consistency.
Yeah.
Okay. Shall seems like it's more definitive than will gives you a little more flexibility, but that's not true.
I believe in the language of policy, will and shall come out equivalent.
Okay,
But I think there is a general perception that it is a little more emphatic.
okay, no, that sounds good. I'll add it.
With the suggested feedback, I'd like to move that we approve of the suggested changes, policy one titled Grand Prairie Public School Division Mission and Guiding Principles.
In order, any discussion on that? All right, all in favor? Thank you to that committee. Advocacy and engagement. Oh, we should have removed that from the agenda. There was no meeting today. So we'll skip to school council update and report. Yeah, so again, most of our board was in attendance. I think it was just last week.
Where's it going, the time?
I don't know. We had a really good turnout from our school council chairs, and a quick recap was we shared some information on enrollment priorities, capital planning, some of our advocacy work with the minister and with our local MLAs. We shared our new advocacy priorities. We talked a little bit about the draft bylaw that we just passed, and we did some planning for future meetings. Our board really appreciates the dedication and input these chairs put into making their home school a better place, but our division as a whole a better place, and having that feedback with that dialogue meeting with them was really great. Looking at my colleagues, did I miss anything? All right. Individual trustee reports. I'll start with you, trustee Martin.
Just for me, I just want to say thank you to those that stepped up and helped cover some of the things I missed last week with sickness. On that note, I'm available on the 17th to attend if need be for holiday and rain.
Fair enough.
All that.
Trustee Cook.
Nothing.
Trustee Lett.
No.
Trustee Johnson. Look at that. It's quick and painless. Just on that note, trustee Martin, there's 7 of us, or 6 of us, so people are allowed to be sick. We haven't happened much.
I appreciate it.
Moving on to superintendent report.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Nellis. So I want to start by offering our congratulations to our high school students who were recognized as first place, second place, and tied for third place recipients in the Christmas card art contest, and express my appreciation to our trustees, Vice Chair Cook and trustees Martin and Johnson for judging. I know that's hard. I've seen all of the artwork after you had judged it, and I felt your judging was exceptional because I had 3 of the top 4 as well. But really impressive work from our students. So those will be distributed digitally this year because we're successful sending anything by mail.
That's exciting.
A few other items included in here that you had the opportunity to read when you received your package, but I wanted to highlight. One is I've included it on page 33 of your package, page 2 of my. I included a table that illustrates the change over the last 4 years of 1 to 3 literacy and numeracy grant. And while the grant revenue has decreased over time, our expenditures have not. And so we knew and have shared with the board in the past that literacy, we considered that to be one of the, what we call the project grants, that we knew the funding would be tailoring off. But I just illustrate that from the perspective that I'm talking with colleagues on other boards or with the Alberta School Boards Association or looking for have any individual board advocacy opportunities with the minister. It's something that has paid large dividends for our students, and we'd like to be able to continue if we were able to continue to afford it.
Any questions on
Wonder if that's something that we should send to the Advocacy and Engagement Committee as well, and see if there's any work that we can do around that. Although we'd rather not have grant funding. This grant was particularly, and we have data to back up.
Well, there's uncertainty about what funding in general looks like next year, and significant increases could yield significant benefits, but it's that uncertainty that leaves us feeling uncertain.
The table itself is a powerful representation.
It is, isn't it?
If you looked at it like in a graph or a number line, you'd see 2 greatly diverging lines with expenditures for the right reasons doing this and funding. They would intersect somewhere straight almost.
It's quite sad, you know, to go from 670,000 down to 38,000 in funding, like from 21 to 25.
To the government's, to give them a little bit of credit there, they always said it was for a particular set of time, right?
Yeah,
But I think from like my opinion, hearing about it, just like how impactful it was, makes it something that we should try and fight.
Part of it too is recognizing that diminished contribution from the government directly reflects somewhat need in the division. So as our intervention does really, really well, less kids are needing intervention. We have, you know, there's a criteria and a cut line that they submit or that they accept for funding. And so that we get $38,000 tells us that we're doing the right work,
That is,
but it's necessary.
in that regard. we want to, we know that students will always require prevention support. So that added to the next agenda for advocacy and engagement for sure. I included a section in here on draft school calendar with some of the key dates. We will be in early January distributing the draft calendars to our schools for staff to review, provide feedback on if there's anything that we can do to improve it. And we'll be asking our principals to take it to school councils as well. Information about an international field trip request that the board had approved last year that is not going ahead due to low levels of interest from students and families this year.
That's a question on it. Do you think there's any indication of what's diminished the interest? Is it cost or is it?
The number of students who just did not show up to participate.
Okay.
I asked that exact question and basically it was just a low level of interest for this trip. Something that has been done in some very similar trip in past years at Charles Spencer. This year, just the interest was not there. If there are no questions about any of the other content that was provided for information in my report, I'd like to turn the microphone over to Deputy Superintendent Robinson to discuss the annual class size report.
Standing to present. Ms. Crichton's gonna actually put a couple of slides I put together just to support the conversation up there, so I will switch spots while I here to present with you for you. So the annual class size report was developed by our Director of System Planning, Kim Frickus, and it's a pleasure to have the opportunity to present this on her behalf. She's unable to be with us tonight, but the annual class size report was developed a bit of a historical background to it. The province of Alberta used to create and generate a class size report on behalf of jurisdictions, and some number of years ago, they discontinued the practice. We felt at the time that the information in an annual class size report was important to support governance, but also to support the work that we do as a system. And we developed our own class size report, which I would argue was more valuable and more authentic than the provincially developed one. And so you've had the experience over the last several years to see the Grand Prairie public version of the report. So a little bit of background. Call this report a snapshot in time. If you have any questions, jump in. But really, we developed this report based on a date after September 30th. In this case, based on internal data on homeroom and court class sizes as of the 13th of November. So that's the day that we kind of chose to build this report on. It's a pretty consistent time to, our division's always moving a little bit in terms of students moving in and out, but it's pretty consistent by the time you get into November. And so we actually have a really detailed summary of every classroom in our school division that's kept on multiple spreadsheets that shows us classroom by classroom in each school what class sizes look. So that the information you're getting aren't averages and they're not generalized, they are actual data based on our system. As you know, our September 30th enrollment was 1.36%, so almost 1.4% greater than it was the previous September 30th. So we grew by 1.4%. The downside to that is that we went into the process projecting 3.1% growth based on the preceding 2 years of having significant growth and felt comfortable having 3.1% growth, which is a target that we did not meet. We had a 1.36% growth over the period of time, leaving us a difference of 1.74%. What's really important for the purpose of reporting is that when we allocated our staffing, we start that work really early on in the spring or late winter, we actually built our staffing around the projected growth of 3.1%. So we staffed our schools as if we would have 3.1% more students than we did. We ended up only having basically 1.4, but the staffing remains in schools. And you can see the impact of that on some of our very favorable class sizes. So as you know from past years, in limited circumstances, where we're unable to, for whatever reason, have a teacher employed to meet some larger class sizes, we will utilize education assistant FTE. And sometimes that's a choice made preferably by principal or by preference by principals
based on their understanding of what's best for that classroom, that an education assistant meets the needs of those students better than splitting a class. And sometimes that's because of space, and sometimes it's just practically because that's the best support that's needed. So you'll see a couple of cases where education assistant FTE was used to support some of our larger class sizes. Purpose for you is to give you a really good understanding of class size in our division. It's one of those core pieces of governance is understanding what schools look like. And if there's a topic that probably you hear from the public in general settings, it's about class size and the challenge with class sizes. And so this gives you some background information to be able to engage in those conversations in a little bit more meaningful way. So the report's structured as follows, the way it's designed. The report is broken into 3 different sections. And the first cluster of classes that we look at are our kindergarten to grade 3 classrooms. Then we look at grades 4 through 9, and then our high schools 10 through 12. Each section has, as you can see, 2 tables that comprise the information on that section. The first table looks at 5 years worth of data, and it looks at the total number of students that are in that grade level. So students K to 3, how many there are and how many classrooms exist in the division year over year. And you can see from 24-25 to 23-24 what those differences look like. The second table gives you 5 years of data and breaks it into the ranges of class sizes. So it looks at class sizes that have between 1 and 17 students. Spoiler alerts, we don't have any classrooms with 1 student in them, but that's the range we use. In this particular case, in grades K to 3, and it shifts a little bit, we're looking then at student classrooms that have between 18 and 24 students, and then classrooms that have 25 plus students in there. So within that, there are columns that break down the percentage of classrooms in each of those ranges. And so I'll go kind of section by section. And again, if you have any questions, jump in. One of the things you might notice, if you look at the table, and a good example is in the kindergarten to grade 3 table, the very first one that talks about the number of students overall enrolled at within a grade level and the number of classrooms that support that. You'll see something that kind of looks statistically like an inconsistency. And so if you look in 24-25, we have 2,611 students in kindergarten to grade 3, and they had their needs met this year with 118 classrooms. The previous year, we had 2,632, so about 20 different students, 20 more students, but we ended up having 6 more classrooms to provide the needs for those classes. Now, that's for one reason. It's quite simple, is that the distribution of students across the system looks different from year to year. And so depending on where students are enrolled and the schools that they happen to be in, the number of classrooms we need varies from year to year. And you'll see from this table to the table on grades 4 to 9, the kind of the exact opposite thing happening. And so really it's about where students are distributed throughout the system. And it happens to be in this particular year that in order to meet the needs of 2,611 students, it required 118 classrooms. And you can see that number over time really being relatively consistent and moving around a little bit. Any questions about that specifically?
It's interesting the way you phrased that. When I was looking at this, I was wondering, it seemed like we were having larger classrooms or that we use more classrooms in previous years, but now when you say that, it's almost like, okay, well now that bubbles in grade 4, right?
Yeah, you'll see that when you look at the grade 4 classroom, the number of students remains relatively the same as well over the last 2 years. And there's a difference there of 7 classrooms. We have 7 more classrooms in 4 through 9. So it's just it's shifting around. So overall, the number of classrooms remains relatively stable. It's just a bit of an anomaly, but it stands out as something that makes you curious when you see it.
Yeah. Chris Johnson.
I don't know when I should ask different questions about different things.
Start out.
For the kindergarten to grade 3 or grade 4 chart, it only goes up to 25 plus students compared to the others, which go up to 32 plus. What's the largest class size in that cohort?
We'll actually have some slides that get into that a little.
Oh, sorry, I'll just let you finish talking.
That's okay. It's a good question, because it actually over time, and that's why I was saying that, in the table, the ranges of what we try to get for class sizes is actually described in here, the class size guidelines. So Ideally, when we're staffing, these are benchmarks that we really keep as our guideposts for staffing when it comes to assigning teachers in classrooms. So in kindergarten and grade 1, ideally, we're looking at 20 students per class plus or minus 4. So we're looking to have classes ranging from 16 to 24 students. It's not a rule, but there are guidelines that we use that assist us in creating effective staffing. Likewise, I won't go through all of them, but you can see the different ranges that exist in there. And so you'll have class sizes of 32 when you get into junior high school, and ideally they're plus or minus 4 students. So, up to 36 and as low as 28 is kind of where we would look to have a junior high classroom, those sort of things. So those are the guidelines that we use. I have some information really specifically, Chris, about the question you asked. So if you look at K-3 reporting, and I'll go through each one of these tables, just to help understand how the tables work. So in each one of those, the current year is bolded, and it tells you the percentage of classrooms we have that are within that range of classes. So in the jurisdiction, currently 14% of our classes in K-3 contain between 1 and 17 students. And in brackets is the total number of classrooms. So there are 17 classrooms that are about between 1 and 17 students. 60% of our classes contain between 18 and 24 students. That's a total of 71 classrooms. And then 25% of our classes, which rounds up the last 25%, have 25 or more students. And the highest that it actually gets to is 28, with the exception of 4 classrooms, which we have identified, one of which has 31 students and 3 classes that have 30 students in them. And so the majority of them, when they say they're 25 plus, they are at 25. They're at 26, and then there are a couple that are at 28, and then there are 4 classrooms that are 30 or 31. Those are where the additional support was applied with education assistants, so there are extra supports in those classrooms. One of them is a French immersion classroom. That has some complexities when it comes to staffing, and the solution of having a French-speaking education assistant was one that worked quite well, and they have the ability to break students out and do core learning that way, so.
I was wondering if you had any rooms in that area that you're still seeking solutions for, or have solutions been found and
There aren't currently, there's not for the classes that have 31 and 30 students. We've had some opportunity to try and do some different things, and we were successful with some, like I said, education assistance for some of it, but not necessarily continuing to seek an opportunity for that. Space sometimes is part of that factor as well, where we would place extra classrooms. So the same situation, we have some classrooms in a particular school, we would have one class that has 31 students in it. The next grade level up has an average of 22 in each of those classrooms. It really is sometimes the way students enroll and some of those things that we have to contend with. We will always have that cohort being larger than the cohort preceding it and the cohort that follows it as well. So in that particular context. Reporting on grades 4 through 9, 42% of our classes have between 1 and 24 students. That's 66 classrooms, and 56% have between 25 and 32, which puts it right in the range where we want them to be. That's 97% of our classes. And I've done some rounding. These numbers don't add up perfectly, but we did actually 97% of our classes are right where they need to be in those grade levels. 3% have 32 or more students, and that's broken out. And you can see in the report, there's little asterisks that describes a class that's actually split by part-time teacher FTE. So one of those classes actually has, the largest one has 33 students, but there's actually a 0.5 teacher assigned to split out for core instruction 2 of those classrooms. So they actually end up with less than 25 students in each one of their core courses in high school or in junior high school that they're attending. So pretty good statistics on our grade 4 through 9. And likewise, our high school, 95% of our classes have 32 or less students in it. 5, which is 14, have more than 32 students. And high school is a little bit challenging because there are some classes that have limitations on them, CTS classes, shop programs and things like welding and mechanics that have a limit to the number of students that can be in a program. So the data we have is presented here, and it's one that's a little bit more difficult to be able to present in as linear a way as we can present the other grade levels, because this looks at core classes and some of our CTS courses, but by and large, most of our classes are well within the range of the high school that's acceptable for class size.
Yeah, I mean, I understand what you're saying with the challenges with options with different number of students that can be enrolled in them and how that would change the statistics. But it's still not super helpful having like, I guess, one of the categories have 95% of the data in that for being able to try to understand what's going on in there. Is it possible to split out, for example, just the core classes that wouldn't have those artificial limitations on them to look at kind of like the lower buckets or the lower categories just for the core classes and leave the options out of it?
Yeah, I mean, in the report and the table, it actually breaks out core and classes a little bit by.
Oh, I meant less than for the, like right now it's like less than 32 and larger than 32.
Oh,
But the less than 32 just has basically, I mean, almost everything inside of it, right? So
it does.
it doesn't really add much explanatory value.
Part of the complexity at the high school is we're looking at, in every other piece of data, we're looking at homeroom classes. And at the high school, we don't have homeroom classes singularly to look at. We have a whole bunch of core classes, we have options classes, and then we have CTS classes. And it's just more difficult than that. I'm sure we could break it down in a way that looked like that, but yeah, it's a little bit more complex. And from semester to semester and different quarters, things shift around a lot. Our high schools just are structured a little differently, but the majority of them are within that range of class size that we would say is optimal.
Trustee Johnson, you identified it, it doesn't, the way it's formatted there doesn't provide much explanatory value. What would you like to know about the number of classes that are under 32?
Oh, I'm not necessarily sure. But if I'm looking at, for example, the rest of the report here and getting a breakdown of, for example, the different cohorts, like 1 to 24, 25 to 32, and then greater than 32, like having, I guess, a little bit more granularity there. But I appreciate the challenges with trying to reflect high school classes in the same way. So I don't want to.
I know some of that granularity goes back to this slide here where the targets are different
That
at
makes
those
sense.
lower grades than at the higher grades,
Yeah,
perhaps.
yeah, that makes sense. If 32 is the
Yeah.
target to start off with, then it doesn't really matter if you're achieving 25 or 27.
I know that's why this table is formatted that
Yeah.
way.
No, that's totally fair. And like I said, I don't want to create like
Yeah.
a lot of work. I wonder if maybe there's for future versions of the report, maybe there's a different way that to break out the high school enrollment or class size data to be a little bit more clear, but I don't.
Yeah,
know.
we can look at it. Any other questions?
Would it be possible to get a copy of these slides?
Yeah. Easy.
I was wondering, at the high school level, when you're having that many fully grown bodies and knowing our space crunch at the high school, are all of our rooms equipped to handle that size of classes?
That's the way they're actually designed. I mean, understanding that high schools are different, that instructional spaces accommodate those number of students.
I'm quite fortunate both our high schools are new builds from 2013 to current day. So they are a little more breathing room than in some of the older builds.
My point was going to be that it can get tight though, because you're right, you take growing up bodies and, 32 kids is 32 kids, but otherwise it's something that's quite manageable. What we don't talk about, but class size is one thing, complexity is another challenge that's not part of this report, but when we talk about with principals about class size and assignments and things, it's not uncommon for people to knowing specific, because this is a spreadsheet that has the number of students in it. Our student services department, our principals as well have an understanding of the people who comprise those numbers. And it's not uncommon for to have two class sizes side by side, one having 30 students in it and another one having 26 students in it. And the concern at the administrative level is the classroom with 26, not the 36, not the number of bodies, it's the bodies in the building that can sometimes be the challenge. So it's a separate reporting, but this is one measure of the complexities of staffing. And it is a number of factors that go into staffing schools appropriately. But then on top of that, then comes all the work that happens with the rest of our teams around looking at issues around complexity and support for students that layers on top of that work that Director Nancy Gorgachbeck does with her team and the work of all directors with schools to really get to know their schools really, really well.
Any other questions for, Deputy Superintendent Robinson? To your point, I'm wondering, is there a way for us to like have a visual on what that complexity looks like?
Well, not as clear as this looks, right? But we do our annual report that provides information on codes and services and the work that Director Gorgachuk's department does that gives a sense of need in schools.
I, workshopping this in my head.
Yeah.
I wonder, to that point that you're speaking to, is if we could see what that would look like in a classroom, I suppose. Because we see it by school, right?
Mhm.
Correct? Oh, yeah, no, we see it by grade.
Yeah.
Right? So I suppose in the assurance meeting, we see it by school.
Yes, in their school profiles.
In their school profiles, we do, but I wonder, looking at, I mean, we hear about classroom complexity all the time, and we know that some rooms, as you're saying, are more high needs than others, and is there any type of data that we could have that could show the classroom complexity numbers in a report like this, where we're not necessarily looking at everyone, but maybe outliers to the averages or something like that. I'm saying this because I think the usefulness of it would help us have some understanding on the supports that are available. But it could be something for another day, but as we were talking about this,
I don't know. And I apologize if I cut you off.
I was gonna say we can't do it today if that's what you're.
no, I was talking about, before we go home, James.
Another day.
I don't know what that would look like to give you a sense of what the classroom experience is like because of the number of different factors that make up complexity.
Mhm.
What's complex for one teacher may not be complex for another teacher based on experience and or specialized training or other factors, right? To be able to really understand classroom complexity, I think the starting point I would, and this is just thinking out loud in the moment, would be having a conversation with Mrs. Gorgachuk when we're in that specialized learning services report, going over that and trying to learn about the experience of a complex classroom as opposed to learning about the numbers. Right, because it's not just numbers, it's needs, and it's
Understood.
not just needs either. Sometimes it's the combination of needs. Sometimes it's the combination of needs and numbers.
I would be interested in learning if other divisions had some kind of reporting that they do on it, not to like reinvent a wheel that's because I understand what you're saying, Superintendent McDonald, that it's not always numbers, but we look at data in a lot of ways and we can understand that a number is just a number and that there's more to the story, but it might be something that's interesting and maybe something that we could look at a different time. If the board agrees that that's something we wanted to look at was different models of how something like that could be reported on.
So I'm hearing that it's the will of the board,
I never said it was the will of the
or you
board.
said you wanted to look at it at another time.
Well, I'm saying if it was the will of the board.
Okay.
That we would be interested, that I would be interested to look at different reporting models that are out there so that we're not.
So there is no clearinghouse of reports,
Yeah, fair point,
right? How boards choose to do it and where and when they choose to do it. I don't know what those are,
That's fair.
but what I was going to say was, I'm hearing that it may be will of the board to ask administration to go back and seek strategies for reporting on classroom complexity in a way that you don't currently receive.
Or to bolster what we currently receive, maybe even.
So for that purpose there, I'd come back to when that specialized learning services report, which includes all of the numbers, but they're not broken up into classes. To take those numbers and put them into classes would be a monumental task. But to engage in conversation, when I say monumental task, you know, how many classrooms do we have in the division?
A lot.
400? Right, we don't have an aggregate way of reporting.
Sure.
Right, that almost has to be done by hand. But in starting with exploring what classroom complexity looks like in that review of that report might be a good starting point, but we can look at what reach out to some of our colleagues and see what they do.
People are reticent to talk about, to be honest, to talk about this topic division by division. And one thing the province will not do is share division by division information about coding, right? We've had a request formally to say, hey, just a division our size, coding looks like, we know what our coding looks like, right? What would another jurisdiction similar to ours look like? And the province doesn't facilitate that, nor is it reported anywhere. It's held as internal data and
Yeah, that's fair. I think maybe then at this point, I'm not asking our board to give any direction. But what I guess I would ask is when we're getting that report from Director Gorkachuk later this year, is for our board to kind of keep in mind, is there something else that we think would be helpful to know when we're looking at it? So it'd be helpful, I guess, to have that report in front of us when we're making that, having that conversation. So maybe to recap it afterwards, like, is there something we're missing, or are we confident that we're getting everything that we need to get potentially?
Well, and I think the conversation alone is direction enough to go back and talk with Director Gorgachuk about how he might reformat or modify to try to provide a little bit more descriptive narrative to the report.
I guess, then I would look for head nods. Like, does everyone want him to have that conversation with Director Gorgachuk? Do you guys agree with kind of exploring that, or?
I'm really interested, we talked a lot about classroom complexity and the different factors that kind of go into that. I think it would be really helpful to have maybe in the future some kind of reporting that breaks it out. And I mean, I know that you mentioned before that it's not like what's complex to one teacher isn't necessarily complex to another based on their training and their education. But I mean, surely there must be some generally recognized elements that contribute to classroom complexity, I guess, right?
Well, and we report on those in that specialized learning services report.
Is it all in the specialized, is that, I'm trying to remember and think back to what that looks like.
That's why I thought it might be good to have this conversation after we have. that.
Includes all of the special education codes.
Does it include other factors in classroom complexity like EAL students?
That report does not, that report comes in the assurance meetings.
And there's probably other factors in classroom complexity that I'm not thinking
Well,
of.
the EAL codes are in there
Yeah.
as well, but yeah,
I think it would be helpful if there was a way to visualize kind of how that's distributed across the division. And I know you mentioned like it would be extremely challenging to try to break that out classroom by classroom. Again, I don't want to make it difficult or anything, but I think it would be helpful to understand, are there classrooms where a lot of those complexities are kind of concentrated, where there's schools where that's really concentrated in specific classrooms inside of them, or is it generally kind of evenly spread out? I don't know, I guess like those sorts of questions that I guess we can ask during things like assurance
But
meetings.
you actually get those by grade level, by school, in the school profiles that are included with the assurance meeting.
I guess it's just going through a lot of separate reports and taking them and putting them together.
It is a bit of that. I'm thinking as we're talking about this too, there's generally how we staff schools in general too, right? Schools. And so if you look at this is the product of staffing being allocated to schools, principals making decisions about what class sizes, or sorry, what class allocations look like. And so there's kind of parallel streams of different bits of information to figure into these conversations. And my point was, this is one measure of our schools. It gives you statistically what our classrooms look like. And then there's other elements of different ways to look at classrooms. Complexity is one of those. Achievement is another one that we can look at, the lens to look through.
And I guess we'll save any of the thoughts until we take a look.
So I'm curious though, if you could quantify what you'd like to learn out of what you don't currently have.
That's why I think we should have the discussion after we have Director Gorbachev's report.
Maybe, but we've identified the information that comes in the assurance meetings where you see by grade level, the makeup of the grades in individual schools. You've got the specialized learning services report that provides historical reference to the number of special education codes. We've got the class size report. I'm hearing that there seems to be consensus. We'd like to see what the numbers look like.
I don't think like today that I have anything that I can make a motion on to ask you to do. I think it's more of a conversation to go back and look at what we have and find out what's missing.
And I think it will be that we already have everything but it's just maybe spread out in different places. So maybe that's just on us to go and collate that together and bring it all together so that we can get kind of like a.
To what end? What would you like that increased knowledge to do for you?
Yes.
If it was me, I would want to be able to talk or have a better understanding of what classroom complexity looks like in Grand Prairie Public School Division.
Looks like, or what is the impact?
I don't have a motion for you today. So
No, I'm not looking, I'm just trying to learn more because I don't need your direction. We're gonna go back and we're gonna have a conversation about how we can better present this information. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't mean that antagonistically.
No.
But I'm saying, what do you want to know? Like what it looks like, or what's the impact of it, or what is there anything specific?
I think one of the things that I look for in the classroom, in class size report is, here's our target. Are we within that target, right? Do we have big swings? I would like to know that in classroom complexity, are we kind of evenly balanced? Obviously, ISD is a different classroom altogether, but in our typical classrooms, are we in the range that we find acceptable? Do we have an acceptable range? How do we measure that? And do we have great supports in place to support whatever that looks like? And year over year, is it similar or is it swinging?
Yeah.
I suppose is what I would look for in this report, and I would think what I would look for in that classroom complexity.
Chris?
I don't know if I have much to add compared to what I said earlier. I think it would be helpful for me to understand, number one, like when we talk about classroom complexity, like what are the individual elements, I guess.
What is classroom
What
complexity?
exactly goes into that? And then just understanding, is that, I guess, how evenly is it kind of spread out throughout the division? Is it concentrated at certain grade levels, at certain schools? And like Joan was talking, or excuse me, like Chair Nellis was talking about, just making sure that I guess, and I mean, I know you guys do this work already, but just from my own understanding, kind of that we have the supports in place in the right places to kind of match that and what I guess those supports entail as the classroom complexity starts to increase.
Looking around the table, does anyone else have anything to add to the conversation?
Yeah, I will say that, reporting on that is going to be, it's gonna be a lot of similarities with how the class size report goes, because it depends who shows up in September,
Yeah, I suppose.
right? The trends, I will say this, and we've talked about this lots at the board table and in committee and at various other places in advocacy and engagement. Classroom complexity is a growing concern in our system. To be able, we can identify the variety of factors that influence classroom complexity. But in summary, it is a growing range of diversity in the students who show up in classrooms. So in a grade 3 classroom, you've got students who are poised to, they're getting ready to move from learning to read to reading to learn. That's the general, the way you describe it through grade 3-4 transition. And you would always have students who are traditionally, the diversity in the classroom would be, you've got in a average class, you've got the majority of the students are within the average range, and you'd have a few on end of extreme outliers. Now you may have more students in those extreme ranges and more, the breadth of the range may be greater as well. So the impact on the teachers is their planning has to target the needs of the individual students in their classroom. And so the greater that diversity, the more complex their planning takes it, or the more complex their planning has to be. So that's just an average classroom. And now as our number of English additional language learners increases, as the number of students who struggle with self-regulation or the ability to self-regulate their behavior increases, that's where you see those are the kinds of factors that in general influence complexity. Hard to capture that in a report, easy to capture that in a section in the report, for example, where we talk about classroom complexity and paint that picture. So for that purpose, I think it was a very, I appreciate your patience with me and the questions to help inform that. I think we can probably approximate meeting that need to learn more about what classroom complexity because for you in that report, because in my opinion, that's one of your prime advocacy topics. And to have that understanding, I think will serve you well. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
And not to muddy it a little bit, but that thinking that Sandy has is the right thinking. It's supporting governance. That granular level of by school or by classroom has the risk of sometimes identifying groups within school communities negatively or specifically painting an image of a school that might not necessarily be accurate, but if we're granular about things, there's a potential for it to not be interpreted the way we want it to be. So we'd have to be cautious a little bit about how that is. Oh, I slipped off, but that last slide said questions.
No questions for you.
No, we're fine. That's
Any
for
last
sure.
questions for Deputy Superintendent? Thanks for that.
And thanks again to Director Purchase for putting the thought behind that. I didn't do PowerPoint.
Yeah, well done.
Thanks.
The board work plan is there for you. Yes, Superintendent McDonald, are you?
That's me. Business services.
Business services today?
Yeah, Associate Superintendent Ola Deli sends his regrets. He's attending the Alberta School Business Officials Association annual conference this evening, and actually, he's not attending this evening. He's making his way home this evening.
We think.
But he's included in his report, for this meeting, a summary of where we're at with respect to transportation. And his report provides a little bit of background about what happened last year. So as you know, 2 years ago, the Alberta Education changed their transportation model and gave school divisions 2 years to implement the new transportation plan. The impact on our division and our community with all of our schools in the city of Grand Prairie was so impactful. There was no way we could meet the expectation that first year because the number of buses we would need to add was more than our transportation provider could purchase. And it also gave us an opportunity to try advocate for perhaps looking at those changes to the walk ride rates, because we're looking at a significant increase in transportation expenses when this comes into play. And now we're at the point where we're expected to be compliant with the new transportation regulations for next fall. So Associate Superintendent Oladelli's report segues from the historical, here's what's happened in the past, to a bit of an update on what's happening this fall. And if he were here, I know he would speak very complimentary of our partners in transportation services. We collaborate with the Grand Prairie District Catholic School Board, School Division, and First Student, our shared transportation provider. The meetings that have been ongoing this fall, picking up from where we were last year, have gone very well. The teams are working very well together. We're sharing data more effectively than we have in the past. We've made some changes to ensure that both school divisions are using the same software, for example. So now the data that we have is in the same language. And so it works a lot more effectively that way. And we've got some new staff involved in that, and they're working very well with First Student. The next meeting is in January, and they're going to be meeting as needed, or could even be weekly, to meet an end of February date to have our in-town transportation schedule set up for the 25-26 school year. The Associate Superintendent Oladelli's report is silent on anything to do with busing students in from outside the city limits of Grand Prairie, because our priority is making sure that we have enough buses and we can have effective routes and things like that in the city. That work is ongoing, but it's in a separate stream. And so it involves working with another school division, working with families. We're not sure where we're going to be able to get to that point with that this year yet, but we will have an update in January following the January work. We have some slight concerns about that. We know we're expecting to run a significant deficit in transportation that we've never run before because of the change in funding framework. It is entirely possible. Right now, we are able to run our transportation with no transportation fee. We've been able to cover our costs. We do charge a fee for students who reside outside of the boundary and are able to catch a bus if there's one there. And to their school, there is the possibility that we will, to run a balanced transportation budget, that we may need to charge a monthly fee for all riders. We will wait and see what the budget looks like. We've heard the Minister of Education talk about transportation, saying he's heard the challenges. We've received, short surveys, tell us more about what you're learning or what your experience is. We're providing that information. We're hoping that we don't, but I do want to manage expectations by saying we've got some concerns in that regard. Those concerns extend to our ability to have enough buses to bus students in from outside the city limits of Grand Prairie, because our ability to share buses from outside the city limits into the city is not the same as it is to share buses inside the city because of where our schools are. Our partner division, their schools are the schools of choice, are thus the neighborhood schools for their residents who might live in the county. For ours, they come in and they could go to any one of our schools, and they're mostly, they are congregated in schools like Alexander Forbes, the Academy, or Charles Spencer, or École Montrose. But there are non-city resident students who attend just about every school we have in the community. So we have to, that's part of the challenge with sorting through with that. I don't mean to sound like, and you certainly do not see it in Associate Superintendent Oladelli's report. I do not mean to be a voice of doom and gloom. I just want to provide some sense of the challenges that we face with respect to planning for transportation for the 25-26 school year. And I'll just leave it at that, and you can ask me any questions you like about transportation. If I can answer them, I will, and if not, I will write them down and come back.
So Superintendent John, have any of these sort of financial implications had an impact on sort of the, student wait times, bus arrival times? Because certainly in the last, several years, it's been quite remarkable.
Like the on-time.
The on-time
arrival and that
arrival,
sort of thing.
yeah.
No. I did realize when you asked that question, though, that I did overlook one item from Associate Superintendent Oladelli's report. He indicates some of the staffing challenges that exist for first student as well. They've not impacted our bus routes in town the same way they have impacted some of the other routes that they may have outside the city limits, but we've lived through those kind of impacts in the past. It's possible that we may again, but we're not hearing any challenges with respect. Certainly none have come to me with respect to arrival times and that sort of thing.
Mr. Johnson.
I have a question and I'm not sure if you'll be able to answer it. With the new transportation criteria increasing the range of eligibility, do you have any sense from, I don't know if it would be your data or polling or surveys, do you have any sense of whether expanding the range of collection for students, I guess, for the bus routes, whether that's going to be proportional to the number of parents that you would expect to use those enhanced services?
Utilization look like?
Sure, like do you expect utilization to scale proportionately to
We do.
capacity?
We do. We expect it to, we have this many eligible riders now. We have this many who actually ride. We're using that same proportion to do the planning.
But do you think that proportion is actually going to be accurate, or perhaps like, I know part of it is people that are closer to the school. Surely those people would be more likely, for example, to walk to the school than.
I don't know that surely's the right word. Our experience is that some people who live quite close to some schools would want their children to ride the bus if a bus was available.
If it was available.
Yeah, so we're no idea if our proportionality is going to be accurate or not until parents start applying for bus passes. But we're starting building based on our historical knowledge.
That makes sense. Is there any utilization data from other districts or other divisions about how that scales, I guess, with distance from the school in general?
Not that I'm aware of. There's the differences in transportation models from division to division to division are so significantly different. There's no standard. And certainly similar to an earlier conversation we had, there's no clearinghouse where they're sharing that information either. For example, some communities our size might have 3 different bus providers. City transit may be used at a different rate than it is here in town. There's so many different factors that all we can do is build off of what we have here.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Excellent, thank you.
Thank you for that. Well, thanks. Oh, there was a bunch of professional learning. And that has happened, so. The first one on November 27th, this was on how trustees and other elections, so trustee elections and other elections have been using AI and some cautions that come along with it. It is on ASBA's website if you're interested. It was interesting and one of those ones where it shows you the good and the bad, so that's always interesting. On December 2nd, there was another session with Michael Sullivan. He's a lawyer with King St. Eagle. It was a really good session on criminal record checks and rules around Bill 20. One of those suggestions from him was what Superintendent McDonald incorporated into that edit, where if you are paying for the criminal record check, have it in your bylaw specifically how that works. So it was really relevant and interesting again. And then last night I attended a session by Kathleen Land on the role of a trustee in fostering safe and healthy work and learning environments. It was really, really interesting to go to that session last night and then hear the human resources report today, because it was a lot of crossover for sure. Talked directly about the sphere of influence trustees have in that area and why it's important to staff retention and looking at all of those things. It'll be on the ASBA website. I believe you got a link to it today, but it was also really interesting learning last night. And it was a bit shorter than the other ones, so. Any questions on any of those? All right. Upcoming dates and events. Oh, great. I'm gonna skip over that, go to correspondence. So we had our letter of congratulations to Krista Unbull for the Indigenous Program Coordinator for her award. And we had a letter from PSBA to Minister Gobo on the national parks and another letter from PSBA to Minister McLadies on keeping the word public in education just to directly mean public schools instead of publicly funded schools, which is kind of a catch-all for every type of thing. And then we had a mountain from Wolf Creek Public Schools. 1, 2, 3 in this, and I believe there's a couple more in our next board package, but you guys all got a copy of those in your emails. Is there any questions on any of that correspondence that came out? Right then, I'll look for a motion to go in camera. Trustee Alette, thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor? Looking for a motion to go back in camera. Trustee Martin? Any discussion? All those in favor? Perfect. Following coming back in camera. Superintendent McDonald, did you want to speak before or after the motion?
I'll speak after.
After the motion. All right.
I would like to move that our board receive the superintendent's letter of resignation effective December 31st, 2025, and the transition plan discussed in camera.
Any questions? Or discussion?
I would like to speak in favor of the motion.
Okay.
Even though I know I don't get a vote. I just wanted to express my appreciation to our Board of Trustees, all my colleagues in the division. It's been a great 34 years, or will be by December 31st, a year from now, a great 34 years with the school division. And I'm just very appreciative and very fortunate.
Before we vote on that motion, it's we don't want to accept your resignation. We
I appreciate that.
as a board, we've and as a division, we've greatly benefited from your leadership. it's the school division it is today because of the work that you've done here in leading it and working in it for the last 34 years. So you will be missed. We greatly appreciate you and congratulations on
Thank you.
going to retirement.
Thank you. I appreciate that. But the success of the school division is the people who work with our students.
Right, I'm gonna call the question. All those in favor? Carried.
Thank you.
Wow, that's heavy.
I didn't tell Sandy or James or Cheryl over there what we were talking about.
I assumed you had. I assumed you had.
Surprise.
That being said, that was the only motion coming out,
Yeah.
of our business in camera.
Fair enough.
So I'd just like to, wish you guys all a really great, holiday season. It's been a really good calendar year, not school year, but calendar year. And I hope you guys all have a really great holidays, and we'll see you in the new year, if not at a school turkey dinner before then.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Call us adjourned at 8:10 PM.